Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new, welcome to my channel. I am Jamie Beth. Today I'm going to start a new series, something different. I am going to be doing videos on Fridays as well as Wednesdays. Friday videos are going to be something of me putting on my makeup and telling you something scary, something bizarre, an interesting urban legend, anything kind of along that scary, bizarre, weird, mythy type of thing that has always interested me. I did come up with this idea while driving to work because on YouTube I listen to the scary stories. There's a bunch of sites where they'll just read people's scary stories, and I love listening to that. I don't know why. Anything scary and weird and bizarre has always fascinated me. Anyways, I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to put on makeup and tell a scary story or an urban legend or some type of myth or anything weird and bizarre that I have thought was fascinating throughout the year. I did search YouTube to see who else does this type of thing because, you know, there's no such thing as an original idea anymore. So, of course, I came across Bailey Sarian. Check out her site. I'm going to link it in my description box below. She does makeup murder mystery Mondays, and she's phenomenal, and she's beautiful. I love listening to her talk. She does phenomenal makeup. Anyways, check out her site, listen to her stories. They're really cool. She talks about all types of murder mystery stories. So today we're going to talk about Madame Delphine LaLaurie. If you guys don't know who that is, she had somewhat of a house of horrors in New Orleans way back in the day. And she was kind of mentioned a little bit on American Horror Story. So American Horror Story, I think it was, no, I do know it was The Coven. And I'm not sure if it was like season 3 or season 4 that The Coven aired, but check it out. It's crazy. I love American Horror Story. Let me know if you guys like that too. I'm obsessed with American Horror Story. So she was this like psycho woman who abused slaves. She was born Marie Delphine McCarty. I do have notes, guys. I'm going to be reading a lot of these stories by notes that I've written down. I can't memorize whole stories. I'm not that good. So I have notes, so you'll see me put makeup on and read a little bit of notes here as we are going along. She was born Marie Delphine McCarty, and she was born in New Orleans around 1787. She was one of 5 children. Her parents were prominent in the European Creole community. She was born, you know, to some money. And she was 4 years old. The Haitian Revolution erupted. This was around 1791. It was something that made slave owners in the southern United States and Caribbean very afraid of resistance and rebellion among slaves. So slaves were rebelling everywhere, and this was making the slave owners very nervous. Delphine's own uncle was murdered by his slaves. So again, it was like just a crazy time. Everyone was a little bit nervous about what was going on. You would think that, you know, by this horrible revolution that was going on, that people would treat their slaves a little bit better. It actually made them treat their slaves more harshly because they were so afraid that their slaves would rebel against them. In 1800, she married a French man, and I cannot pronounce his name, so we're not gonna mention his name, and I really don't think his name's that important. He ended up passing away before she had her first daughter. She married a second time in 1808 to a man named Jean Blanc. This man was a well-to-do man, and she had 4 more children with this man. Jean Blanc passed away in 1816. Kind of weird how she's already been married twice, and both times she's outlived her husband. I don't know if there's any conspiracy with that. I haven't read anything, but she probably murdered them. Who knows? She married a third time in 1825 to a man named Nicholas LaLaurie. Nicholas was actually much younger than Delphine. She also had bought property at 1140 Royal Street, and in 1832, they built a 2-story mansion there complete with attached slave quarters. She lived there with her husband and 2 of her daughters while maintaining a position in society. So she and her husband were well known in society and everyone seemed to like them. We're doing really, really well. Here is where things start getting interesting because there are accounts between like 1831 and 1834 that talk about the mistreatment of her slaves. Documents listed 12 slaves that died within a 4-year period while they lived at the Royal Street Mansion. And the cause of their deaths are not mentioned. However, infectious diseases could have definitely been the cause. Among these deaths were a cook and 4 children, which I just find horribly bizarre that no one decided to check up on her when there were deaths of children involved. So I don't know. But a cook and 4 children were among those 12 slaves that were that died mysteriously within a 4-year span. So it was starting to get around town that Madame LaLaurie and her husband mistreated their slaves, so much so the talk was so much that a lawyer was dispatched to the royal mansion to discuss with Madame LaLaurie how she should treat her slaves properly. Prior to that lawyer coming out to their home, a neighbor told the lawyer, hey, I saw an 8-year-old girl jump to her death from the rooftop of this home with Madame LaLaurie hot on her tail with a whip in her hand. So that kind of started a lot of spark with how Madame LaLaurie treated her slaves, because now we have this child that has died. Here's something I think is really weird. This child was buried on the ground, so she was buried in their backyard. What I think is weird, authorities came out to talk to her about how she handles her slaves, and yet a neighbor saw a report of her mistreating her slaves. The slave is buried in the backyard. This child is buried in the backyard, and yet no one did anything about it or thought that was strange, or maybe she covered it up. I'm not sure. It doesn't there isn't too many records on what happened to this child other than she's buried in their backyard. In 1934, a fire broke out in the LaLaurie residence, and when police and fire marshals got there, they found the cook, a 70-year-old woman, chained to the stove. She later said that she set fire to the kitchen in an attempt to kill herself because she was so afraid of being punished. She mentioned that slaves that were sent to the utmost floor of the home never returned, and she feared for her life. During the fire, there were some bystanders that wanted to help out, and they tried to get to the top floor where the slaves' quarters were, and they couldn't enter the slave quarters because they didn't have a key, and it was locked. It was locked. So these people were locked in this room while there's a fire going on in the home. So the LaLauries would not give them the keys to open this door. So they decided, hey, I'm just gonna break it down then. If you're not gonna help us free your slaves that are trapped here, we're gonna bust down the door. And that's exactly what they did. They busted down the door. Upon, entering this room, they found 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated. These slaves were alive still. They weren't dead, so they were living in this manner day after day. It was so awful. Of course, a lot of these poor slaves passed away due to what happened to them. They also excavated the backyard. So they dug up the backyard and found more bodies. One of the young girl that jumped from the roof. If you're wondering what happened to Madame LaLaurie, they fled during that fire and during the mob just ruining their home. They got away, which kills me. How on earth did they manage to escape that? And they did. They ended up in Mobile, Alabama, and then they went to Paris. So by the time authorities were able to like really get into the home, you know, after it burned and after the mob like ruined it, all they found was gaping windows, empty walls. Like the home was totally destroyed, absolutely destroyed. What's really interesting is at some point while she was in exile in Paris, this crazy woman wanted to come back to New Orleans because she did not understand why people would be mad at her. She thought that, you know, hey, whatever, you know, so I tortured a bunch of slaves. So I killed a bunch of people. Who cares? You know, I'm coming back to my hometown. I want to be back. Why? Everyone's going to love me. No one hates me. And her children strongly urged her to stay where she is, because if she does return back to New Orleans, she's going to face some really bad consequences, not death. So she decided, oh, okay, maybe you're right. I don't know, I don't really see the point, but maybe you're right, and maybe I'll just stay where I am, because, you know, I don't really know why you don't want me to go back. Like, she could not understand why she shouldn't go back, but she listened to her children and stayed in Paris. Even this woman's death isn't super well documented. People don't really know exactly how she died. They think she might have died during a boar hunting trip in Paris. There was an account of someone that visited a cemetery and found a cracked copper plate, and that cracked copper plate read Madame LaLaurie. Now, some of these accounts regarding the torture of these slaves were made more explicit as the stories went on, as people began to write more and more about this woman. There was a gentleman that wrote stories regarding the sadistic appetite that this woman had. There were also claims that those who responded to the 1934 fire found male slaves stark naked, chained to a wall with their eyes gouged out, their fingernails pulled off by the root. There were holes in skulls where a rough stick had been inserted to stir the brains. One victim had her arms amputated and her skin peeled off in circular motions, or circular pattern, making her look like a human caterpillar. Another one had her limbs broken and reset in odd angles, so she resembled a human crab. The only type of real documentation that there is on these people is the fact that they were horribly abused and were put on display. So people did see what happened to these poor people. And I just think it's awful that they were even put on display for everyone to see. And what's even worse is this sadistic woman got away with it and was able to live out her life and die like nothing happened, like she didn't do anything wrong. And it doesn't seem like she had any remorse whatsoever, according to the things I've read about her. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story. Please be easy on me, because it is my first time ever telling a story and trying to do makeup, and it was a little bit harder than I thought it would be. But I do hope you enjoyed this crazy story about this horrible, awful woman. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Remember to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, as well as that notification bell next to it to be notified of all of my upcoming videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!